want to welcome everyone to the West Campus High School Black Excellence Panel. Today is February 17th. I'm your favorite VP, Dr. V, and I'll be facilitating this discussion. I want to start off by opening up the space to Principal McMeekin, just to welcome us and to, enter into our space. So Principal McMeekin.
I want to thank everybody for being here, especially our panelists. And Dr. Verscher put together a phenomenal group for us to listen to. And I'm just so excited about what we're going to be able to hear and learn about in celebration of Black History Month. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and jump right in.
So to know the past is to know the present. To know the present is to know yourself. You often hear this notion that Black history is American history. What's often taken away from this conversation is that Black history is American history that has been denied and been denied time and time again. Many of us on this panel, as African Americans, we had to learn about our history through our parents and or as adults navigating in predominantly white institutions. And it is an experience that is not uncommon for Black children in this country, to not know who they are and to spend so many years in K-12 systems learning about quote unquote American white history. But when it's time to learn about ourselves, it is denied time and time again. And so I want us to think this through. The fact that we have to have a Black excellence panel is to highlight the fact that a lot of our heroes have been assassinated. It wouldn't be a big deal to have a Black excellence panel if our legacy and our history was taught, and if our heroes still had an opportunity to have life. Oftentimes, when you are a pioneer in this country, a Black person who's a pioneer, a Black person who uses their voice and their privilege and their life to speak truth, you're often assassinated. I mean, the new movie Judas and the Black Messiah with Fred Hampton highlights that. At 21 years old, he was taken away too soon. So for many of us, who have to be, exemplify this idea of Black excellence, we are the epitome of our ancestors' dreams. And so I want you to think this through as we're learning about our panelists and learning about the obstacles they had to overcome in order to be an elite person or perceived as an elite person in this country. What was their experience in college, in the work field, in the workforce? And why do we even have to celebrate Black history? And so to know the past is to know the present. To know the present is to know yourself. I hope that you take from this opportunity to learn about the panelists and then challenge your own identity, challenge your own privilege, and challenge just this idea of Black history being denied continuously in this country. So, introduction of our panelists for the first session. Principal McMeekin, the first panelist is Denier Verscher, MBA CPA.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Denier Verscher. Denier currently serves as the Vice President of Finance for the nonprofit Easter Seals, Superior, California, where he leads financial strategy, reporting, and compliance. With the changing pandemic environment, he supports the CEO and board by shedding insight into the financial management of the organization to save countless jobs throughout the organization. Born in Oakland, California, Denier is known for his speed and competitiveness in track and field. In high school, he was a three-time state championship finalist and Northern California champion, which brought national attention alongside a scholarship to UCLA. At UCLA, he earned All-American honors as a member of the men's 4x400 relay team in the NCAA championship. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in economics, Cal State Long Beach with an MBA, and earned his CPA license, certified professional controller license, and certified management accountant.
Okay, friends, first make your board look like.
All right, and so our second panelist is Crystal Evans, Coach Crystal Evans.
So Coach Crystal Evans was named Academy of Art University women's basketball head coach in April 2019 after serving as the program's interim head coach. As the department's senior woman administrator, she held the role of assistant athletics director of academics and admissions liaison, Coach Evans earned her bachelor's degree in political science from UCLA, her master's degree in kinesiology from Fresno Pacific, and is currently completing her PhD in sports leadership at Concordia, Chicago. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, in which she was one of the youngest women to hold a regional leadership position, representing Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Nevada, Utah, and Washington. Her leadership also extended as the representative of Japan and the Republic of Korea.
You's a boss, okay? And she is my big sister. So you go, Crystal. Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. The next biography, Darnell Gant.
Darnell Gant is the current owner and CEO of CrossFit, a Black-owned business that prioritizes the physical, mental, and spiritual health of underrepresented communities. Prior to becoming an established entrepreneur, Darnell was a dominant center at Crenshaw High School, which earned him a full scholarship to the University of Washington. At the University of Washington, Darnell's leadership both on and off the court inspired his team to reach new records. In fact, Darnell was the first UW player to record 100 wins during their career. He also ranked 18th in the Pac-12, which is a huge honor. Darnell played basketball overseas for many years before coming back home to Los Angeles, California, where he married his college sweetheart, Mrs. Dominique Grant.
All right, so without further ado, we'll start with Coach Crystal. What was your experience like being one of 96 Black students admitted to UCLA in 2004?
Well, I'd like to first thank Dr. V for inviting me to be a part of this experience and to share this space with the rest of our distinguished panelists. To answer your question, my experience as one of 96 African Americans admitted in the class of 2004 at UCLA was no different than being one of 5 African Americans in my graduating class at Pacific Palisades High School when I first attended there for my first 2 years. And so I had to reference my experience at Palisades because it really shaped my approach to attending UCLA, where I've become numb to being one of or the first of many different accomplishments or being in these different spaces where you're identified as other. I would never, ever exchange or regret my experience as UCLA. To be one of 96, it just meant that I was a big fish in a small pond and was able to have firsthand opportunities that may not have been awarded to me if I were one of 1,000, you know? And so it's all about perspective. And that's something that I share with my student athletes every day. You know, it's, oh man, it's only 96 of us, or it's, hey, it's 96 of us and we're going to double that number by next year. And we're going to do so well that we will never be one of 96 again. You know, we're going to set the bar so high that other students see that they too can attend UCLA who look like us and think like us, or maybe from the same background as us. And UCLA are going to see, hey, you know, they did so well. We want more students like them from wherever they're from, you know, but it starts from your perspective, your foundation. And if you're going to embrace what it means to be different, if you're going to embrace what it means to be special, and then pay it forward and develop other special young people.
I love that. So for those of you who are in the audience, again, Crystal's my older sister, and Darnell and I went to middle school together. So 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And we also went to school 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade together. What I want to highlight though, especially for Crystal and Darnell, I remember my 6th grade year at Audubon. So Darnell's 7th grade year and Crystal's 8th grade year. We lost a classmate to gun violence. His name was Clyde. And he was shot in front of Masterburger, and which is the equivalent of West Campus, like where our school is, to McDonald's. And I think every year since Clive's death, we lost 1 or 2 classmates to gun violence each year. And then, I mean, it became so bad. It was like this bloody summer, and where we lost a lot of classmates. And so I want to talk about that impact of loss and then carrying that into these predominantly white institutions. Because there is a level of code switching that you have to do to really survive. And there is culture shock. So Crystal and Darnell specifically, right? Coming from the environment that we came from, how did you navigate into these predominantly white institutions?
I'll defer to Darnell first, since I just answered, and follow up.
For sure. Thank you for having me, Dr. V. Well, just to answer your question, I think the biggest thing is the culture shock, like you brought up. That was the first thing that came to mind. It's just different when, even if you're not in that type of lifestyle, if you're not a part of the like gang culture and just, you know, have that mentality, we grow up in a place where you have to have some type of street awareness, but then you go off to college, and then now it's just different. Everything is different, and now you kind of bring your values that you have to have growing up so that you can navigate around school, navigate around like in middle school, high school, and then you get to college where you kind of feel like, where you kind of see people and it's different. You don't see as many Black people. So now you see white people, predominantly Caucasians, and then you think in your mind, okay, well, maybe I could let my guard down. But then at the same time, you don't really want to let your guard down because of the history that we come from, and you automatically think all Caucasian people or white people are bad, and they, you know, they're out to harm you regardless of what their intent is when they meet you and when they speak to you and different things like that. So it's really tough when you come from the environment that we come from, and then you come to you make a whole 180 change, and it's different people, different vernacular, different way to carry yourself. And then now when you act a certain way, you're portrayed as, you know, where you came from, when that's not even what your real lifestyle is. So that was kind of a tough thing for me.
I appreciate you sharing. I think the biggest takeaway I heard in that is like this idea of safety, right? You don't necessarily feel safe where you come from, but then you go into predominantly white spaces and you also don't feel safe. And so it's like carrying that load, you know? Crystal, do you want to chime in before the next question?
Absolutely. Adding to what Darnell had to say, I take it a step further in the sense that it shaped what I wanted to major in. You know, gun violence, gang violence, and how guns and gangs are even entering our neighborhoods played a role into why I decided to major in political science. And so I answered the first question in terms of perspective. My second answer is along those same lines. I'm seeing Black boys and girls impacted by gun violence in my community now have this opportunity to step outside of my community and learn what Malcolm X, you know, referenced when he talked about the bullet in the ballot. And it's like, now I'm putting myself in a position to learn how to impact policy, how to be in the front of change, where I can go back and teach my community what it is that I'm learning in a way that they can receive it. You referenced code switching. Yeah, when I'm in those spaces, it's 500 students at UCLA in the political science courses. That's a typical lecture. And there's about 5 African Americans in that lecture. And you talk about this group in this comfort zone Darnell referenced, you know, my circle was really, really, really tight. And I think it was a lot tighter because of where I've come from. I value a tight circle out of security and safety. Well, from that tight circle, now we're learning that hidden curriculum, like, oh, yo, this is how they approach this situation. And this is how, representing the majority, let's just put it out there, this is how they impact change. This is who we got to get to know so our voices can be heard and we can do something about it. Then go back home and I go, yo, E, this is what it is. We got to do X, Y, and Z. This is how you do it. Boom, bada. It's a done deal, you know? And so for me, the impact of losing different friends prior to my first day of college, it was, how can I do something about it? Instead of just being upset and angry and carrying this hard share, carrying that weight, how can I release that and make sure other people don't have to?
Thank you for offering that perspective. Danye, you grew up in Oakland, California. And so because I'm married to you, of course, I know your journey, but I think it's important to also like talk through what was it like transitioning from Oakland to UCLA and now into this role as VP of Finance. Most people don't even know what a VP of Finance do. So what was that transition like, and what does a VP of Finance do?
Well, it's definitely a long journey from Oakland to you know, where I went to school, same school Crystal went to, UCLA. You know, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I grew up, I actually grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't as violent, and there were parts of Oakland that were known for being very violent. When you saw Oakland talked about on TV, it was always about gun violence and things of that nature. And even though there was a lot of nice parts and things like that, but when I went to UCLA, it was you know, you would talk to people and that's all they would talk about. And I'd have to explain it like that. You know, I had a lot of friends, you know, like on my summer track team who went to McClymonds, who was probably equivalent to when you talk about Crenshaw in Los Angeles. And we, you know, we got along very well. We were all the same. But I could see like when we went to high school, they couldn't take their books home when I could, things like that. Their experiences were very different than mine, but we were all the same. And we all went to college. We all did great things. I have one friend who's a head track coach at Cal. He's done great things there. He actually won a national championship at the same school Crystal is a basketball coach at. So when people try to frame us like Darnell was saying, with our background, a lot of times people try to look at us differently. But where you come from is not necessarily, you know, a lot of Black people have been put into negative circumstances, but that's not who they are. They weren't, you know, born to be put down like that. It's just their circumstance.
I want to touch on something because it fits with what you're saying. There was a period of time, despite having a CPA, an MBA, and all of these licenses that you have, that you thought about changing your name on your resume to Dean. Can you walk us through, despite years as a director of finance at UC Berkeley and, you know, CFO, you thought you had to change your name on your resume?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing about it is, I thought, you know, now I graduated high school. I got the Bank of America Award for mathematics for highest achievement student in math and science in my school. You know, I got my degree from in economics from UCLA. I got my MBA from Cal State Long Beach. I got my CPA license, and I thought that would always get me in the door, and it didn't. Sometimes I didn't even get a interview where I knew I was overqualified. So yeah, that made me want to change my name. And an experience I had with one position I worked at when I was a senior financial analyst, the director of our tax department actually, you know, we were all out, you know, at our job, we would go out, you know, have fun as a department and things like that. But one of the directors said, I got this resume from this student named, you know, Jamal Jackson or something like that from Cal State Long Beach. No way I'm hiring a Jamal Jackson with a bachelor's in accounting from Cal State Long Beach. And I was like, wow, I never heard something like that before. And then I knew it's not always a fair thing. And so I almost changed my name just because I was like, well, if I fit in, if I sound the same, if I sound like a John Smith or something like that, then I have a better chance of even getting in for the interview.
Thank you for sharing. And you know, this is tough. You know, I'm his wife, and I see this. It'd be times he'd be passed up for a job, and we Google the person, and they didn't even have a CPA license. They didn't have an MBA. They had a bachelor's and like 5 years experience. How do you reconcile that, you know, to your spouse, right? Who's interviewing and busting in her butt. And so we see it firsthand. And so, Denier, again, what does a VP of Finance do? And why did you co-found the National Society of Black CPAs?
The Vice President of Finance, you know, and of course, I love math. I love numbers. I wish everybody did, but math is a great thing. It's a very powerful, math and science is very powerful things. But anyway, Vice President of Finance, I am the head of the finances for the entire organization. I would say I treat myself as the head consultant for the organization. I touch every part. To put into context, like if Darnell went to start if he had one location for his CrossFit and he wanted to start another one, he would come to me and be like, "Hey, is this going to make our finances better or worse?" And I would do analysis and give him the context and put it in and say what I would do and give him the decision. That's what I do for the CEO of my company, who's the leader over our company. So I set the strategy, I set the financial planning, and I make sure, as John said, I make sure we save jobs. So when this pandemic happened, a lot of businesses went out of business. A lot of companies lost money. And we actually applied for a large grant and got money for that. So I make sure we survive all uncertainties and make sure our organization does well financially. So.
Thank you for that. Speaking of business, Darnell, you are the owner and CEO of CrossFit. What advice do you have for aspiring CEOs?
That's a great question. It's actually Cross Fitness, and the advice that I would have, the only reason why I say that is because CrossFit is an actual thing, and I don't want it to get confused. I don't want people to think that I'm the CEO of actual CrossFit, because that would mean I would make a lot of money, and I don't. But what I would say for anybody who's trying to go the entrepreneur route is that to just step out on faith. I believe that I have a strong connection with God. That is the center of what my wife and I are doing with Cross Fitness, because as you can see, it's emphasis on the cross. Cross Fitness is already a thing, but we wanted to do our own where there's emphasis on the cross, right? Renewing your mind spiritually as well as strengthening your body physically. So what I would say is, like, just step out on faith and just step out on what you believe. If you have the gumption to want to do something on your own and make money on your own, then take the necessary steps to do so, right? Make sure that you're saving before you start up. And then when you're ready, just dive into it. Because the formula that I have and my wife and I have together is different than I would necessarily say to everybody. But the best thing that I can say is jump out and just step out on faith. Because for myself, I'm big on jump in and figure it out as I go, and let the chips come as they may, let the lumps come as they may, and I'll figure it out and just keep figuring out. But a lot of people don't have that type of mentality, and a lot of people, once the first wave of the negativity comes, then they'll back out of it. So I would say whatever works best for you in the way that you're trying to pursue your entrepreneurial goal, but just go 100%. And if you want to be cautious in what you're doing, be cautious, take your time and do it, but just be committed to doing it. That's what I think, that's the main thing that I would say.
Thank you. So Coach Crystal, we know that sexism is prevalent in the sports world, okay? What challenges or barriers have you had to overcome as one of the only women in your division and the only Black woman, and I think Black person in your division?
Yeah, there's my team is situated in the Pac West Conference, and there's 2 African-American head coaches, myself and a male in Hawaii. And there's 3 women head coaches out of the entire conference. And so when you intertwined the barriers of the intersection of gender and race in my career, you're motivated to, again, open doors for future women and African Americans in my case. And so I know I'm a big fish in a small pond again, just like I was at UCLA. And it's, okay, what are you going to do? Yes, you feel a weight on your shoulders of, I have to do well so someone else can have this opportunity, or I have to do well because if I mess up, it'll take me a decade to get back to this same position. We recognize all that, but pressure builds diamonds, and pressure is a privilege in my field. And so for me, I am going to go, as Darnell said, I'm going to be committed 110% to outwork every single opponent, to outwork my staff, to attempt to outwork my staff, to just make them want to outwork me. That's the competitive nature of our career, right? The more you try to outwork your opponent, you outwork yourself, you outwork yesterday, right? But to take it a step further, I never lose an opportunity, never lose a day to get better. I'm extremely reflective, extremely reflective. I reflect every night. And so for me, it's, okay, yesterday we executed this, and I took the time to talk to this player about what's going on in her personal life. And I checked in with this mentee from 4 years ago. She graduated. Okay, well, what else could I have done to maximize my full day? And when I can continue to be that reflective, I can go to sleep knowing that, one, I bettered myself, I bettered my program, and I'm continuing to utilize my platform to develop other young women who look like me and put them in a position to be where I am right now. You know, I hope that answered your question, Dr. V, but that's all I could say. I see Darnell had his hand up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate to everybody who's in. I've known Crystal since I was in sixth grade, I believe. And the one thing that I can say, I can't speak for women and the situation that she's been in, but what I can say is, due to seeing her success, is that you have to have a different mentality. And I think when you talk about Black History Month and when you talk about Black excellence, one thing that I'm proud of as being Black is that we have to have a mentality that we have to work for everything that we get. You can never have a mentality that it's going to be given to you, right? And the same things that Crystal is saying, like right now, and the same mentality that she had that as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old child. You know what I mean? And you can see how it manifests in her life. She talked about how she had to work harder and bring out the competitiveness within herself as well as within her circle around her, so that they can make sure that they don't lose an opportunity to get better. And I just wanted to chime in on that because that's the same mentality that I have. I always reflect. I was up last night thinking about what I did the day before and how I can get better. Even though I'm not playing basketball anymore, I can still apply that to my everyday life and want to make sure that I'm getting better each and every single day, whether that's spiritually, whether that's physically, whether that's mentally. All of it matters. And again, as Black, as minority, you have to have that chip on your shoulder. You can't think that everything is going to be easy. And it's just the way society is set up. When you're a minority, you come from an environment where everybody is looking down on you and everybody expecting you to fail. So if everybody is expecting you to fail, have the mindset to say, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to prove you wrong. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or anything. I had a friend tell me the other day, we were talking about just Crenshaw athletics and basketball. I believe I'm the last one to come out and go to a Division I college after Crenshaw. Now they've had some, JCs in Division II or Division III. And I'm not saying that to big myself up, but I'm saying I had to have that mentality to where, look, I don't know what y'all gonna do, but I know what I'm set here to do, and I know what my mission is and what my goal is. And I'm gonna press towards my goal, and if I get it, I get it. My goal was always to get to the NBA. I didn't get it, but I ended up playing overseas. That was the next big thing. But my expectation for myself, I had a standard for myself that I had to be higher than everybody else. Not cocky, but I had for myself so that I can better myself.
Dr. V, can I add to that just one quick second? Thank you, Darnell. I really appreciate that. But we're athletes first, right? And we've grown into being coaches and CEOs. But when you're a student athlete, you constantly hear big time players make big time plays in big time games. And that is the root at what Darnell and I are getting at. It's not about this deficit mindset of poor us, we come from this. We come from this, so our iron is sharpened. We're sharp. We're ready. We're ready for battle. We done made it through this. We can make it through anything. But at the same time, we are built to succeed. We are playmakers. We want the ball in crunch. We're Jordan Game 6 every single time, wherever we are. It doesn't matter where we are, who we're up against. We're that same beast, and that carries over into real life.
So last question for this session of the panel before we move on. So Denier, there are real discrepancies with the numbers of Black accountants and Black CPAs. Can you give us that number and then again express why it's important? That you co-founded the National Society of Black CPAs.
Yeah. So So the National Society of Black CPAs is the first Black association dedicated to CPAs. I want to put context in this. A CPA is a certified public accountant. It's a state license, which is basically the biggest credential you can get in finance and accounting. And the average CPA, for example, makes on average 25% more than the average accountant without a CPA license. So it's pretty much a big deal. It's like passing the bar for a lawyer. And you could do so many things. You could start your own firm and things like that. So one of the reasons we started that association is only 1% of CPAs in this country are Black. You're talking about out of 650,000 CPAs, less than 15,000. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start it, because it's just a travesty. It's only 1%. And the other reason is tied to that 25% more, is that we wanted to get more people that license so they can generate more generational wealth, because we know when you make more income, when we grow that in the community, then more people will make more money. They'll have more to invest. They can grow, they can be homeowners. They can pass it down to their kids. They can pay off their debt and things like that. So that's, I mean, one of the biggest things we wanted to do. And so to get that license, you have to take an exam. I paid a few $1,000s for the review course, and a lot of people don't necessarily have that. So one of the things the association does is actually give scholarships, create our own internal CPA review led by Black CPAs to prepare people for that exam, where there used to be an obstacle there, right? Like people can't afford the exam, they won't pass. And in my case, at the time I took the exam, I paid for the cheapest review course, didn't pass the first 3 times. And I learned I had to invest more in myself and more in the exam to pass the exam to get me through. So never go cheap on your studies, on your review course and things like that. Now that's different than saying go for the most expensive college or grad school and getting the extensive college debt. That's, it's definitely not what I'm saying, but this was a few $1,000s where you want to invest that money. You're not going to go into lifetime debt.
Well, what I like the most is that the organization is given a pathway where we know Black students can't afford to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on this exam. And so by uniting CPAs across the country, you've essentially helped create that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's also idea sharing and things like that. A lot of people, I never knew anybody. I didn't know CPAs growing up. There's people that do, but I didn't even go to school to do accounting. I wanted to be a physical therapist or a doctor. I was into kinesiology, much like Crystal. But nobody exposed me to that. My parents aren't accountants. They did their profession, but they weren't accountants. So you have to be exposed to those things to realize it. So it's also bringing exposure and also mentorship. In my career, I didn't, it took me longer to get to this point because of not having mentorship. Mentorship can speed up your career quickly. And I say the importance of that is the faster your career grows, the more money you'll make over your career. It's as simple as that.
So I want to thank this session of panelists for providing your lived experiences. And thank you so much for your time. For the sake of time, we're going to jump ahead to session 2, the journey of a pioneer. So let's hear the bios for our panelists.
So, sorry, first we have Dr. Iwana Peace. Sorry, I just drank my coffee. You got me right at the wrong time, Dr. B. She's a native of Sacramento, California. She currently serves as the Director of Social and Emotional Learning and Equity for Folsom Cordova Unified School District. Prior to this executive cabinet position, Dr. Pease was the principal at Arthur Benjamin Health Professions and an assistant principal at CKM McClatchy. Today, she brings a wealth of knowledge and experience serving diverse populations, including foster and homeless youth, incarcerated youth and adults, persons with disabilities, undocumented scholars, individuals from historically underrepresented communities, various gender identities, and sexual orientation.
All right, Dr. Pease, our next guest.
I'm excited to introduce DeShaunis Gray. As an educational consultant, Mr. Gray provides college planning and consulting services to high school students, focusing on the individual skills and talents of the student to guide them to their best college match. He has a special commitment to empowering first-generation and underrepresented students and facilitating their success in college. He also has a phenomenal jump shot.
Nice. All right, and our last panelist for this session.
Yes, I am so excited we have this panelist with us today. We are very fortunate at West Campus. So unicorn amongst the crowd, Meryl Tengesdahl. She is a colonel from the U.S. Air Force, is a proven Navy and Air Force combat pilot, engineer, mother, wife, and reality television star.
Hey.
As the first and only female African-American YouTube pilot, Meryl motivates clients to strive towards excellence in all aspects of life through fitness training, executive coaching, and personal inspiration. Combat pilot with over 300 combat hours while serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, Meryl earned her Navy wings of gold while flying Seahawk helicopters on multiple cruises that included the Middle East, Caribbean, and South America. In 2021, Meryl received an honorary doctorate degree in engineering from her alma mater, the University of New Haven, for her pioneering career and the far-reaching impact she has had in helping others soar to new heights. Welcome, Meryl. Thank you.
Wow, that is amazing. The first question to Dr. Pease. You were a student at West Campus. What barriers existed during your tenure that fostered your decision to disenroll?
If I could, I need to just backtrack a little bit.
Girl, back it on up like a U-Haul truck.
So I went to James Rudder Middle School, which is in South Sacramento. And what drew me to West Campus was I had a friend, her mother was involved in the volleyball scene, and you know, she raved about the academics as well as the volleyball program. So that's what enticed me to go over there, despite living in South Sacramento still. So going to West Campus, it was kind of like a culture shock to me. The student population was primarily Asian and white. And so in the earlier panelists spoke about safety, and I did not feel physically safe at West Campus nor emotionally safe. And there was a group of boys who were harassing me and challenging me to fight. So anybody that knows me knows I really don't back down to many challenges. And so trying to utilize problem-solving skills, right, before it turned into a big deal, because I always took academics seriously, I did not receive any support from administration, from teachers, or anyone. So I took matters into my own hands, and it was an ugly situation. And so I was given the harshest consequence possible. Given that my mother was an advocate of mine and supported me, she made the decision to remove me from the school because it was clear as day that I wasn't going to get the support that I needed, and that there was not a system of justice or restorative, practices that were in place. The situation could have been resolved a lot easier with adults who noticed things that were taking place and just refused to speak up on my behalf. Or, you see a girl outnumbered by a group of boys, and you would think that you need to jump in and figure out what's going on, but nobody took the time to do that. And so just as a matter of safety, my mom felt it was best that I left. And honestly, I was happy to leave. And I went back to Florin High School, and I felt like I was at home. So I did not feel connected. I didn't feel a sense of belonging, but that physical and emotional safety was not present.
I really appreciate the fact that you shared that experience, because I think as, an administrator at West Campus, we can't pretend that systems of injustice just like solve itself, right? we're still in the legacy of Brown versus Board how many decades later, and it's the same issue. And so thinking through about how you felt unsafe as a Black student at West Campus, it really mirrors what students in BSU tell me all the time. And so West Campus teachers and staff, we have some work to do. And so I hope that's a lesson from this panel, Ayana's experience, Dr. P's experience. So
If I could
understanding,
add
go
one
ahead, girl, chime on in, girl.
I
Yes.
just want to encourage the adults that are on this call to listen to student voice. And if you have students that are telling you they don't feel safe or they don't feel valued or they don't feel connected, please do not engage in racially gaslighting them. Listen to them and hear their experiences, because it's coming from the baby's mouth. And you know that the idea of perception is reality. This is what they're experiencing. And although it might be difficult for you to digest as an adult, because, you know, as adults, we tend to think we're doing this, that, and the other. But if students are sharing their experience with you, please be reflective and create a space that's safe for them to share their feelings without being criticized, judged, or in severe cases, you know, in situations where they feel like they're going to be targeted for sharing their experience.
Thank you. So thinking about all of that context puts into place the work that you do as Director of Social Emotional Learning and Equity. I just want to highlight Dr. Pease is like my top dog. That is my best friend. That is my girl. When I first got into Sac City, she was my mentor. She lifted me up and she's put me into different positions, like within AXA, which is, you know, a national association. And so I thank you for that, because you've been a true sister and partner for me. So I know that this role that you have as Director of SEL and Equity is a big deal in the education field, but most people don't know and they don't understand. So you're a pioneer at Folsom Cordova Unified as Director of SEL and Equity. What do you do? And, you know, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
So I want to start by saying the Director of Social Emotional Learning, that's the position that was held previously before I accepted the role. The equity piece is new. And I imagine that the equity piece was added on given everything that was highlighted over the last year, between the pandemic, between the murders of Black folks like George Floyd and many others, and just racial injustice. So I feel that that's why the equity piece was added, but both of these topics are topics in which I'm passionate about. And so Dr. V, you know that I wasn't in any rush to leave Sac City, but I'm a firm believer, and sometimes, you know, you got to step out on faith and do things that just spark fire inside of you. And so when I saw that position, I was like, hold on, what's this? And so, you know, I read the job description and I was just like, oh yeah, I could do this. So I threw my name in the hat, and lo and behold, they saw value in what I could offer. And it's interesting because Folsom Cordova is a very white district. And so there were some very interesting interview questions, but one of the questions that I asked, and this is one thing that I want the young people of color on this call to remember, is that when you're interviewing for a job, it's not just folks determining whether they want to hire you. You're interviewing them also. Like, do you want to be part of this organization? Do you feel that you can bring value? Do you feel that you can work in this environment with the folks that are interviewing you? Because it might not be a right fit for you. And so knowing a couple of people that were on the panel, and hearing about the work culture, I was comfortable with entering into that space. And so for me, it's about creating equitable outcomes for young people, particularly folks of color, but then also for marginalized groups, and being able to, you know, fight for the things that I believe in. And being a counselor, shout out to my other counselor here on the panel.
Shanice.
You know, the social emotional learning piece is a big deal for me as well. So I am the only Black woman in cabinet for the Folsom Cordova Unified School District. My predecessor, she was a Black woman as well. And although her title did not include the equity piece, there was some work that was being done there. But, you know, I'm most excited about having a seat at the table because I brought some things to folks' attention. Like, I've only been here for a month, and Dr. V, you know that there's been some things. I'm like, hold on, pause. We're not doing that. We need to address this, and here's why. And giving a different lens to process things through. And then, just feedback from the superintendent. She appreciates that I'm upfront and honest about the things that I'm seeing. And we've been making corrective action immediately. Like, since day 2, I've been calling things out, and they have been super responsive and made some changes, significant changes. So for the young scholars on this call, it is okay to use your voice. You have Dr. V and Mr. McMeekin as advocates for you. You cannot expect for equity to be done gradually, and we got to slow down because people are uncomfortable. For the adults, if you think that it makes you uncomfortable, I challenge you to think about how your students feel every day, the students of that marginalized group. Anytime you feel yourself getting uncomfortable, just sit in that for a moment and say, wow, this is what my Black students or my Hispanic students or my LGBTQ plus students feel like every day. Think about the young people before you think about your vulnerability. And I just challenge you to engage in that uncomfortable state that you may be in, and just dig a little deeper, because there's power in that.
Ooh, wait, come on, you preaching and teaching and reaching, sis. All right. DeShanice, it takes a lot of courage to begin your own business and brand. What is an education consultant, and what anchored your decision to create your own business?
Oh, that's a great question. I just need to stop and just say everyone so far has been spot on. When you look at the shared experiences and that communal feel that we have as, Black folks in similar spaces in general, it's that connectedness that we feel. So everyone's been really good. Myself, when we talk about pioneers and being a black person in America, you tend to be the first to do a lot, right? So even for me, it was like, graduating from college. I went to a historically Black college and university, and that was a fantastic experience for me. And then, to get my master's degree and then to start a business, it was a lot of firsts for people within segments of my family. And so that's a shared experience that many of us have. And so the first business I actually opened, was a family entertainment facility in the Elk Grove area, Laguna's Awesome Party Palace. And so that fell due to COVID, which sparked me to kind of pursue my dreams in terms of supporting students in another capacity. And so I want to backtrack because what Denier, is that correct?
Yes.
I share an experience as a business owner. I purchased a business that was already established. And being in that greater Sacramento area, I went through the process in my mind of, what does that promotion look like? This is an established business and now I'm the new owner. Would people be receptive to me being the face of that business? Is it worth it to promote? Does that increase business, or does it make it more people are feeling like they have to feel away, right? When there's a change, it incites feelings. Do I love it or do I hate it, right? If someone changes a recipe, do I like it more or do I like it less? They very rarely feel the same. So when he spoke about thinking about changing his name, I go through that as myself as a brand and a business owner and saying, how do people receive that? And so this now college consulting bridges, kind of some of the expertise I have with what I'm really passionate about. An educational consultant is simply someone that is there to make sure that the student finds the best fit for them, right? As a guidance counselor, I've only gone to Sac City Unified Schools, right? I've gone to many elementary schools, went to Will C. Wood, went to Luther Burbank High School. But as an adult, what I witnessed were many students chasing colleges based on name or based on accessibility and coming back home or not succeeding in that space. And so as an educational consultant, what I do is I work with the student and the family and say, let's find out who you are as a student and as a person and put you in the environment that will help you succeed most. At my alma mater, Johnson C. Smith University, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, roughly 1,400 to 1,500 students. The class sizes looked more similar to Burbank. The teachers were more relatable. You know, I had a Dr. V, you know, that was like a dean of my department. And so I could now focus on my academics and not make some of the adjustments that some of the colleagues on the call had to do when going to UCLA, which is a huge university, and making that adjustment to being the minority. It shifted for me. You know, I went from being 20% of the population to 95% of the population, and no longer worrying about the appearance or if I can relate or what it would be like in Black History Month. Now we're focused on pushing each other and shared experiences and learning about those from New York and from Florida and New Orleans and out of the country. So my goal now in this consultant role is on the counseling side to make sure that I get students at a place where they are comfortable chasing those dreams. And as a consultant, making sure that there are people receiving them with open arms on the other end.
I want to ask this question because I think it's important, right? Our students have guidance counselors, and I'm not saying our students at West Campus, I'm saying Black students across the country have guidance counselors, right? But as a Black parent, I know that I cannot rely on my child's guidance counselor to get my child into the best position possible. And I assume and I expect that the guidance counselor at my child's school is going to look at them racially and then say, apply to a Cal State. I know that because when I had a 4.4 GPA at Crenshaw, all of my counselors steered me to Cal States. Yes. And so it is important that we have a DeShannis Gray as a consultant, as a guidance counselor, to then say, no, this school will be a good choice, or this type of college, the HBCU is a good choice. So some people may be wondering, well, why do you need to have an education consultant? And so I want you to speak to students who are even parents on the call. Why should they consult your business?
You know, I want to, that's a great point. And, you know, I'll tap into something that we talk about in terms of broadening our scope, right? Even as a young man, you know, I didn't have the talent that Mr. Gant had, you know, but I love sports, right? And so I played basketball and football and numerous sports. And so had I earlier took my mind off just being focused on playing the game of basketball or playing the game of football and all the jobs that come with it, whether it's marketing and coaching and officiating in these different fields, then I would have maybe chosen a path that led to that. And so when you talk about how we steer students, it starts with opening their minds to the options and saying, you're passionate about the medical field. You may think you want to be a nurse, but what about a doctor? What about a hospital? What about an executive position somewhere? What about being on a board, right? You may think that you want to be a teacher. What about a principal? You know, and there are these different fields that our students see one or two jobs in. They think about being an officer, but not necessarily the chief of police or, you know, over a union. And so it's looking at the different jobs within a field. And it's the same with education. It's saying, okay, I want to go to UC Davis because of its name. But is that the best school for you, right? There are other UCs, there are other schools maybe out of state. There are different options for each student to say, there are a lot of different ways that schools hold prestige, and maybe Davis is the place for you, or maybe it isn't, but let's look at you holistically and let's look at all the options. And so it's really putting the student in the driver's seat. Even as a counselor, as a guidance counselor, it's listening. It's me not thinking that my experiences trump theirs. And so often you see a student come to you, and as soon as they start to explain their situation, you have already written and said, oh, I know what that looks like, right? How many parents and adults do that? Oh, I've been there before. This is all you're experiencing, as opposed to being in that student's shoes and saying uniquely what they feel is still unique to them. And that's what I do as a counselor and a consultant, to say, I'm looking at you as a person and what's best for you, not what's best for a student who I think looks like you or was in your similar experience.
Thank you for that. Colonel Muriel Tangusto, you are the first and only African-American woman to serve as a U-2 pilot. What was the biggest challenge you faced in this role? And even just thinking, like, what is what was rewarding in your holistic experience just in the military and what you're doing now?
Okay, number one, thank you, Dr. V, for having me here today. And so this is a two-part question. So let me go back to the U2 challenges. So I'm gonna give the premise that this is 10 years into my military career when I switched over to the Navy, to the Air Force. So a lot had changed in those 10 years. And for the U-2, the biggest challenge, quite frankly, was flying that aircraft during the interview process. The U-2 is not for everyone. You can't be a typically a new pilot going to the U-2. You're experienced, you're an instructor, you probably have over 1,500 hours at that point. What I enjoy about the U-2 is that it does not care about your gender, your ethnicity. It doesn't care. Do you have the correct control inputs to make this aircraft fly? Because if you don't, it's going to kill you. Are you able to sit in the suit, and are you able to have the constitution and the fortitude to sit in an area that's the size of a telephone booth and breathe 100% oxygen and not hear things or feel things as well, and not have a place to go to the bathroom and fly for 10 hours on end doing a mission and then coming back and landing that aircraft? So that is probably one of the bigger challenges. The aircraft is not for everyone. I've seen this aircraft humble many people, regardless of where they come from in their background and what they had. And I've seen other people, such as myself, do very well in the community. So you backtrack 10 years before that, in 1990s, when I joined the military. You know, for women in the military, women couldn't be combat pilots. It was very few and far between. At that time, the Navy was actually trying to recruit as many minorities as possible into the field to be pilots.
Uh-oh. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, someone muted me. Of the five Black women that were in my class, I was the only one to graduate. And the sentiment across the board, it wasn't the flight instructors that were their problems, but it was the sim instructors who came from this Vietnam era that saw all these people of color coming in and having this attitude that was less than happy about it, and they would display that, and that could affect us. But when you're going through a program like that, and something I wanted to fly since I was 7. I wanted to be an astronaut since I was 7. You have to be able to persevere and hold the higher ground when you are up against people like that. You have to know that as a student, your position, you can't fight them. So what do you have to do? You have to just be professional and take what it has, because you know that the goal's in sight, and you know that this is just one flight or a moment of pain that you have to deal with, but it's going to pay such big dividends if you could just get through.
I'm so sorry. So, awesome. Well, women are poorly represented in STEM. As an astronaut, what advice do you have for girls who feel that they do not belong in the field?
So I just want to make sure people understand, I'm a U-2 pilot, high altitude, not an astronaut. Close, but not quite, but equally as good. So for women, for girls, there are opportunities out there. I grew up in the Bronx, was born and raised in the Bronx. My mom still lives in the same apartment 50 years later. And when I was growing up, I had this lady who was a teacher who knew my interest in wanting to become an astronaut. And she gave my mother a book. It was a book about this thick of STEM-related programs that were possible to kids in the tri-state area. And there was different requirements. And my mom looked at me and she said, "You're going to pick one and go there this summer." And one thing, I grew up in a single parent household. One, my mom may have not working and may not have been there, or I stayed at my grandmother's house, but she was very interested in me saying, like, "You're going to apply to a program. I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to pick one." So she was very adamant about that, and she was very focused on that. Number two, there were some opportunities, and I did pick some programs, which led me to do research and STEM type programs. At that time, they called it STEP programs at universities, which led to other things. So what I say to kids now that are looking, there are programs out there. There are opportunities, but you can't just sit back and think they're going to come to you. The universe is not going to bring stuff to you. You need to get up and go out and search and find and talk to as many people as possible. It may be uncomfortable, but that's what you have to do, because if you're not doing it, the person who really wants it is out there doing it. Everything is not that easy in life. It will not come to you. As an older person now, I stress to people who are in positions, in STEM positions, that you have to make those opportunities available for people. So if you're working in a company such as Kitty Hawk Aero or Palo Alto, which is down the road, have programs available for kids in underserved areas that they could go to and learn STEM and be interested. Because especially for girls, we are interested. My mom was telling me, hey, you're interested in this, go do it. I had a teacher who said, here are some programs laid out for you. I have currently, quickly, I have a foster daughter who's 6 years old, and I've had her for about 5 months. When she first came into this house, we were looking at the cartoon Doc McStuffins, and I said to her, do you want to be like Doc McStuffins? And she's like, what? And I said, do you want to be a doctor when you grow up? And her answer was, no, it's too hard. This is a 6-year-old girl at 6 who has just said it is too hard, had never been exposed. And I said, it's not hard. It may be hard, but if you want to help animals and you want to help people, then become a doctor. And this is a girl who went from 5 months ago, who didn't even think about doing STEM or going to college, that now talks about graduating high school, going to college, being something more than she is. Because as adults, that's our role. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, you have to show them that there are other opportunities, even if you may not have had them, but we have the wherewithal to be able to show and at least talk about it. So for women, so I'm going back, for girls in the field, show them that that opportunity is out there and try to push them in that direction. If it's not what they're interested in, that's fine. Find out what is interesting for a girl to do. And I think you'll be surprised.
Well, we have FemCo and Girls Who Code at West Campus. We would be honored if you would like to spend some time mentoring our girls. And for the Black girls that are on this call who have struggled with joining Girls Who Code or FemCo, we have a living, breathing legend here. She did it, so you can do it. And now it's no more excuses. I want to see more representation of our Black girls in FemCo and Girls Who Code. I want to thank our panelists for this session and introduce our panelists for our final session. So session 3, social justice, human rights, and hip hop. Hey, all right. Our first panelist, the introduction for Lauren, please.
So Lauren Bouchard is the project manager, Just Cities Innovation Lab at Detroit Justice Center. Ms. Bouchard is a doctoral candidate at Columbia and explores the health impact of race and gender-based discrimination. She has served as a research coordinator and a public health analyst, among other roles. She is interested in public policy and public health, especially relating to incarceration, health disparities, HIV, AIDS, reproductive health, and advocacy.
Welcome, Rebecca Sheff.
Rebecca Sheff is an alumna of UC Santa Cruz and recently completed her Master's of Legal Studies from Pepperdine University. She is a Bay Area native who works for equal rights advocates and coordinates 2 of their major legal programs, Advice and Counseling and Ending Sexual Violence in Education, ESVE. These programs represent clients in gender discrimination and Title IX cases. Before working for the ERA, Rebecca worked with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, where she conducted healing circles that were reparative in nature and focused on inclusivity. And we have a Go Slugs in the comment, and I believe Go Waves for Pepperdine.
Nice. Our last panelist, Zenova King.
Oh my goodness, you guys. I am so amazed that Zenova agreed to be on this panel. She has such an insane resume. It would make your jaw drop. So if you know YG, if you know 400 Records, you have Zenova to thank for that. Ms. King has worked on in multiple areas of the music industry, including BET, Rock Nation, Entertainment One, and Def Jam. She brings to the panel a wealth of knowledge of the entertainment industry and the delicate balance of advocating for and representing Black artists during the era of social unrest. Zenova King, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, so before we go ahead and begin, I just want to highlight that Dr. Peace texted me to tell Miss King that YG is her baby. On the side, she's married, but that's her baby. So Dr. Peace, I put in that word.
Boo. Let them know. Let them know, okay?
So our first question, Miss King, since we're on the topic of YG, what does a general manager do for a major record label?
Everything. Well, before I jump in, happy Wednesday, everyone, and happy Wednesday to everyone who's been on here from this morning. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very appreciative. But the general manager basically works side by side with the president of the record label and the company. Our situation is very interesting because we are 400 Records, very independent, small label, but our JV and our partner is Epic Records. And Epic, if you know, is the major Sony label, and the JV is who we work with and partner with. So if you think anything, I like to think of things in a 360 perspective. So you guys all think about it every day when it comes to the music industry, and the general manager's job is to know all aspects. So you know radio, you know digital, you know social media, you know publicity, you understand marketing, you understand what it means to put together a plan from beginning to end. And you also have to understand and comprehend really how to put a budget together and predict what's going to happen in the next cycle, in the next quarters, and how you're going to roll out your projects from beginning to end. But when becoming a GM, it's not as fun when I was young, because it's straight business. And I think when people think about GMing or the music industry, we think about the fun aspect of it, but there's a lot of business. There's a lot of music business. And in the last maybe 3 years, I transitioned into music business. So I'm understanding in a different space. So that's GMing. It's not as fun as it sounds, but it's just business at this point.
I love that. And I want to say you look fly. I thought you were Fantasia when you first came on. I want to say Auntie Tasia done joined this line. So
when I have my hair short, people tell me that.
You look fantastic. So our second question, hip hop is a male-centered art. Essentially, how were you able to rise to the top? We don't really see a lot of women like as GMs. I think my exposure is like Cookie Lion on Empire. Right? And so like, How did you rise to the top?
The panelists before hit it right on the nail. I connected with her story. I'm from the Bronx, single parent home. Every opportunity that I wanted, I literally researched. I'm a research kid. If I saw something, and even before I guess Google was a thing, because I'm 32 years old now, but I would 106 in Park, TRL. I'm from New York, so I worked on 42nd Street and Times Square at Cold Stone Creamery. I give my career to Cold Stone Creamery. It broke me out of my shell. So to answer your question, TRL was a thing. I'm not sure if the kids know, but I would literally be outside, 14, couldn't go upstairs. And then it transitioned from being 14 to 16, and I can go upstairs now because I made those connections. I was networking. I understand what the barter system was. People wanted the ice cream and I wanted tickets. You know what I mean? And it was an even exchange, but I was also networking my way to the top. And when I say that, I was interning my senior year of high school. I graduated high school 2006. I already had application to intern, and no one really told me to do it. I just knew, of course, being Black, I was going to have to take it further. So instead of doing an internship in college, I was already prepared for it in high school. I already researched it. I knew the amount of credits I needed to have. So in terms of rising, I interned 4 years in college. I started in high school. I started networking in high school. So when I graduated in college, my resume was already 4 years in. I already had maybe not manager level experience, but I was able to come in as a coordinator in any field whether that was publicity, whether that was TV, whether that was special events. So I interned from 17 to 21 before graduating.
Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling.
It's not going to come to you. It's not going to come. You're going to intern. You're going to work for free. I don't think you work for free anymore, which is even better. But that was the best thing that I've ever done. I left knowing all the VPs. So could you imagine being 21, 20, and you already have your network? And the good thing about it, it was not only in music, it was in TV. I knew teachers, my mom's a social work. So my whole world connected. And I was also a prouder of NARAL pro-choice. Everything in my world was about advocating for kids my age, older than me, in my community as well. If that makes sense.
Awesome. So Rebecca, what fostered your decision to become an equal rights advocate?
Ooh, good question. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, Ms. DeCio, for inviting me and being one of my biggest supporters and best friends for the past, how long has it been? 6, 7, 8 years. So I work for Equal Rights Advocates, which is a national civil rights organization dedicated to protecting and expanding economic and educational access for women and girls, specifically through litigation, direct services, policy advocacy. I think what fostered me to become an equal rights advocate was just growing up in South Berkeley, going to Berkeley High and just seeing the disparities that I grew up with. I think a huge quote that stuck with me was a Malcolm X quote: "The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman." And just growing up, I was like, that's just unacceptable for me. And I wanted to get into work to really help Black women and women of color. When I interviewed for this position, I asked them, like, this is the research I want to do. I want to help Black women. I want to know how to deepen restorative practices for them and kind of engage in holistic healing. Will you let me do this? Is this a job? Is this a place where I can do this? And they were like, yes, absolutely. What do you need and how can we support you? So that was a huge reason why I joined ERA and became an equal rights advocate, because I asked and they created a space where I'm able to do the work that I want to do. Also, as a survivor myself, I have a lot of experience to share, and I really wanted to help people that are going through some of the most difficult times of their lives, and show them, we're not victims, we are survivors, we are resilient. We thrive from our community and our support systems, and you go and into these meetings with attorneys and you're seeing all these faces and these suits and you're like, what is going on? What's happening? And I had a little girl once say to me, your hair is like mine, you look like me, and just representation matters. So to be someone that can be in these spaces and be like, look, I grew up in the hood, I pushed to get where I am, and you look like me, or your hair looks like me, and you can understand kind of the journey that it takes to be there and have someone that supports you in those ways. So that's the short answer to that question.
Love that. I just want to say, Warriors, we're going to be about 7 minutes into your lunch. Thank me later. I'll hook you up when we turn back to in-person learning. You touched on something, Rebecca, that I want to highlight and then ask, right? When we're thinking about like ending sexual violence, like in education, and I'm thinking through like the Me Too movement, it is centered around white women's experience with violence. I think about Bill Cosby, right? Someone who was a legend in my home. And I only heard of the 50 white women that said, he violated me. I didn't know that Black women voices were also a part of that conversation. And so it made me as a Black woman, like not want to essentially defend Bill Cosby once I heard Black women voices like peeping through the cracks. When we're talking about ending sexual violence in education, it is a white-centered conversation. How do we empower more women of color? So Black women, Hispanic women, even Latino women, Asian women, how do we get their voices into this conversation? Because our voices are really absent from this. And when we think of, women who are often, on the receiving end of violence, it is Black women, Hispanic women, Asian women, trans women. How do we amplify those voices too?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent question. This is directly the research that I do. I'm actually working on a paper right now that is about how COVID is impacting women of color and specifically Black women in terms of parenting and time off and workplace discrimination. So it's very, very, very relevant, and it's not talked about that often. I'm doing research for this project, and in all honesty, the research just isn't where it needs to be, and it's not talked about in the spaces that it needs to be talked about. I think it's important to remember that, 40 to 60% of Black women report being subjected to sexual contact or sexual assault by the age of 18. That is an insane amount, 40 to 60%. And I think part of that is really digging deep into this idea of restorative justice and healing as a community and creating the spaces of support. I think it's important to encourage women to come forward, to be able to feel safe in who to tell and who to talk to, but also teaching our boys, teaching the young men in our communities how to respond, teaching other women how to protect, who to go to, who your Title IX coordinator is on your school campus, making sure that information is available, which you're actually required to by federal law. So just, engaging in creating the spaces that need to be created. I think education is huge. There's healing in knowledge, and there's power in community. So creating that community, creating the space to learn and educate and continue to share that information. I think that's the most important. Cultural competence is a process. It's not a destination. This is going to be, it's going to be an ongoing project. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. There's always room to grow. There's always room to do better. But I also think, reaching out, becoming, joining organizations. My organization, we work with high school students and college campuses all over just to give information, do presentations. We have ambassadors. We're, pretty active in doing all of those things and trying to make some real, change on the litigation side, but also on the policy side. So I think those are all very important to kind of create that, to support survivors and feeling comfortable to come forward, and then for women of color to be in those spaces, and be heard. It's a part of our reality every day.
Thank you so much. Lauren, you are a program manager at the Detroit Justice Center. What inspired you, or was your main inspiration to do the work that you do now?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. I've really enjoyed being in the audience. Plot twist, I left my job at the Justice Center. I'm in the dissertation phase of my doctoral program, so I'm gonna commit to just being in a cave until that gets done. I'm ready to be out, but the inspiration for both are the same, and that's really to address structural and institutionalized racism beyond interpersonal racism, but unpacking what are the laws and policies that we've passed locally and at the federal level for decades now, intended to keep racial stratification in place. And the inspiration for joining the Detroit Justice Center in the first place was I'm somebody who feels very strongly about anti-capitalist work as a fundamental component of anti-racist work. And I was glad to be joining this nonprofit law firm that was doing that work and finding ways to do that work in service of Detroiters.
So because you left Detroit Justice Center, I want to focus more so on your scholastic endeavors. I just want to throw that out there, that if you need a set of eyes, I'm a peer reviewer at a few universities. I can hook you up, black girl to black girl, PhD
All
to
right.
ED.
I like it.
So just throwing that out there. What is your topic of interest with research, and how do you think you can change our larger society with the research that you're conducting?
Sure. So my dissertation looks at the health impact of structural racism. I'm using public housing policy as a proxy for structural racism. Specifically, shout out to all my New Yorkers. I live in Detroit now, but New York, what's up? I'm focusing on NYCHA housing. as a longstanding institution of structural racism. We know that NYCHA housing was built in large part. Robert Moses said that the goal was urban renewal. James Baldwin countered and said it's actually Negro removal, what you're trying to do. And it's been about warehousing Black and brown people. And because it is the country's largest single landlord, we can look at the policies and how they've affected the health of residents as an example of structural racism and its impact on health.
So Zanova, I want to tie this in and wrap it up with a bow. So I'm throwing this last question on you, sis. So we've learned about structural racism, housing, health policies, ending violence, against women, and violence in education. And I think about hip hop music. I think about artists like YG, who, I'm from South Central Los Angeles. So when he hears BPT, he's speaking to me. I grew up down the street, okay? Songs, about politics, FDT is a song that a lot of people know and resonated with. And so I think about artists like YG, and they've been influential in bringing awareness to social justice movements, right? Why do you think music has been an art form that connects people across racial, social, economic backgrounds?
It's been our outlet for generations. If you think hip hop is not the only genre, before hip hop and before the YGs, there was Sam Cooke. There was the individual speaking from a place of endeavor, from a place of deep within, and music till this day is what reaches the masses. Television was one thing, radio was another, but within the genre and within my community of music, it's going to continue to be music to spread the message. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And I think you hit it on the nail, right? You have a YG, or you have a Nipsey, or you have, they're also dealing with it. We're from the same communities, and it's almost the cry. And it's still poetry. It's still a form of poetry. It's still a form of outreach, but now we have it on a magnitude level. And I think that's what happens with music. And it's not an unfortunate thing, but music is a business. And I hate to use that term, but it's the most funded business. It's a business that Black folks are not a part of in terms of higher levels. And if you go back and do your own research, Universal Music is by, if you realize who owned the music industry, it'll hurt some of your feelings. You know what I mean? So in terms of the music being pumped out, I'm happy we could get a F Donald Trump out, but it was also banned on radio. You know what I mean? So it's a deep conversation. It's glitz and it's glamour, but it's deep and it's dark and it's white. Napoleon. Do you guys remember Napoleon when you were reading in school? That's who owns Universal. That's like 16 something, Columbia Records. It's 1809. It has nothing to do with Black people. So I am a part of it. And when I transitioned into music business and I realized what was happening, I was a wide-eyed kid from the Bronx, excited, doing publicity. I thought I was just doing my job. And then when it got deeper, I was at Rock Nation meetings and I said, guess what? The kids that are at the concerts are not Black. What are we doing? So when you, Lauren, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but when you said at NYCHA, when I was at E1 working, I left my job every day to sit with kids in the projects in 125th Street, because that's my job and that's my duty. So I left work to sit with them Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the summertime, and demanded that my job make sure we have tickets for them, because the kids can't afford it. And when you guys do afford it, it's Summer Jam and it gets shot up. That's what happened.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
All right, see, that's boss woman, okay? The phones be ringing, okay? Business is business. You're fine. Don't be apologetic. It's okay.
So
We're taking it in your time.
It's deeper. It's music. It's our loudest platform. So when we do get a Kendrick and we do get a Cole, but remember, Cole, it took him a while to transition. You have to wake up, and some people wake up in their late 20s. Some people already awake in college or high school because they have this experience. Look how diverse the kids are, and the panelists and the teachers. We all have to learn from each other. So I think I love music, love it. I'm going to continue to do it. But my duty is to make sure we're having an honest conversation about music. So I hope that was okay.
No, that's perfect. I just want to wrap up today by thanking every single person who was on the panel. You all are living legends, inspirations. I've learned so much. I've grown so much just in our time together. I also want to thank Ms. DeCio and Ms. Posetnik, for respecting the urgency of my plea to have this Black History Month ceremony. This meant a lot to me. I pushed really hard to get us to have this, and Principal McMeekin supported me throughout the entire time. And so I want to thank you for your leadership and for always backing me up, even when I introduce these tough conversations. He always has my back, period. There's no discussion. And so to have a true ally and a friend in Principal McMeekin has been life-changing. Ms. DeCio brought in excellent panelists, so thank you so much. And Ms. P, you have been an ally, a friend, an advocate, and thank you so much. For the faculty and staff who signed up, I appreciate it so much because you gave our students an opportunity to hear Black voices. Black History Month at West Campus has been something that we haven't really had. And this is going to be the last year that that happens. We're going to do something every year. And I know that the staff backed up this vision, and it just makes coming to work via distance learning that much sweeter. So I thank you all, and unmute yourselves because we got to end with a bang. Unmute yourself. Everybody on the call, unmute yourself, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. I need to hear go Warriors, go Warriors, go. Go Warriors.
Yeah. There you go. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, you guys.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Where's everyone?
You the bomb.
We're gonna do this at middle school.
You the bomb, sis. Yeah, you know it's me, girl.
I want to give you a shout out too, Mama Lynette. Thank you for holding it down.
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes.